Now, the greatest radio shows of all time.
Suspense.
The Shadow Node.
Washington calling David Harding, Counter Spy.
Classic radio theater.
The Great Gildersleeve.
Fibber McGee and Molly.
Dragnet. Gunsmoke.
The Lone Ranger.
Now, step back into our time machine with your host, Wyatt Cox.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum.
We go back 83 years to April 9th, 1939, the early police procedural, long before it was called that. It was just a cop show back then, Calling All Cars and the Rope-Bound Trunk. And we thank you for joining us on this Saturday, 9th day of April, 99th day of the year. We have 266 days remaining till we get to 2023. Passing by a single vote, the Senate ratified a treaty with Russia in 1867 for the purchase of Alaska. In 1939, Marian Anderson sang at the Lincoln Memorial after having been refused the right to sing at the Daughters of the American Revolution's Constitution Hall.
Ladies and gentlemen, in this great auditorium under the sky, all of us are free. When God gave us this wonderful outdoors, and the sun, the moon, and the stars, He made no distinction of race or creed or color.
Don't think I need to mention this if the circumstances don't make it obvious. The singing you couldn't tell. Marian Anderson, a fine African-American singer, introduced by then the Secretary of the Interior, Harold Ickes. Of course, there were, even in 1939, many people just still... People, if you didn't live in that time, you don't understand racism. Even living in my time, if you weren't born in 1956, you don't understand racism, because I still experienced it. And no, I'm not African American, but I saw it and I witnessed it. And I think that to say that what you're suffering from today in America is racism, you ain't got a real clue. You really don't. The most brutal event in the Pacific portion of World War II began on this date in 1942 in the Philippines, the Bataan Death March. Now, this eyewitness account is not for the squeamish. You've been warned.
We started the death march in groups of 100, about 3,000 or 4,000 of us in the line, marching by fours. About 3 Jap guards to 100 of us. Didn't see any officers, mostly those superior privates of theirs, men with 2 or 3 stars in their uniforms. They'd slap our soldiers across the face, beat them up. I saw one of our men carrying a new pair of shoes. He sat down to take off his old shoes. The Japs came up and took away both pairs. That lieutenant walked 7 days in the death march, and when we arrived at the end of the journey, he didn't have feet, just a mass of infected blisters.
Differing sources report widely differing prisoner of war casualties prior to reaching Camp O'Donnell, from 5,000 to 18,000 Filipino deaths and 500 to 650 American deaths during the Bataan Death March on this date in 1942. The U.S. Atomic Energy Commission, formed on this date in 1945. Warner Brothers premiered the first 3D film on this date in 1953, House of Wax. NASA announced on this date in 1959 the selection of America's first 7 astronauts.
It's my pleasure to introduce to you, and I consider it a very real honor, gentlemen. From your right, Malcolm S. Carpenter, Leroy G. Cooper, John H. Glenn, Virgil I. Grissom, Walter M. Shira, Alan B. Shepard, Donald K. Slayton. These, ladies and gentlemen, are the nation's Mercury astronauts.
The news media quickly dubbed them the Mercury 7. In 1969, the Chicago 8 pled not guilty on federal charges to a conspiracy to incite a riot at the 1968 Democratic National Convention in Chicago. After a bombing in West Berlin on this date in 1986 that killed 2 American servicemen linked to Libya, President Reagan told UPI's Helen Thomas his frank opinion on Libya's leader.
We know that this mad dog of the Middle East has a goal of a world revolution, which is targeted on many of his own Arab compatriots. And where we figure in that, I don't know, maybe we're just the enemy because it's a little like climbing Mount Everest, because we're here. Everyone's entitled to call him whatever animal they want, but I think he's more than a bad smell.
The president ordered retaliatory strikes against Tripoli and Benghazi 10 days later. A federal court found former Panamanian dictator Manuel Noriega guilty on drug and racketeering charges on this date in 1992. President George Herbert Walker Bush reacted in a meeting with reporters prior to discussions with the president of Nicaragua.
I think it's a major victory against the drug lords. We're going to continue the fight against drugs in every way possible. But I think it's significant that he was accorded a free and fair trial, and he was found guilty. And I hope it sends a lesson to drug lords here and around the world that they'll pay a price if they continue to poison the lives of our kids in this country or anywhere else.
Now, Noriega's attorney, Frank Rubino, fired back.
This, in our opinion, is the modern-day version of the Crusades, that the United States will now trample across the entire world, imposing its will upon so-called independent sovereign nations.
Noriega sentenced to 30 years in prison. Baghdad, Iraq, fell to American forces on this date in 2003, and while there was a lot of celebration, Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld told reporters it was not nearly over.
There's a lot more fighting that's going to be done. More people are going to be killed. Let there be no doubt. This is not over, despite all the celebrations on the street.
Rumsfeld was right. The war continued until 2011, and in many ways, it is still not over today. After refusing to give up his seat on an overbooked United Express flight, Dr. David Dow Duong forcibly dragged off the flight by aviation security officers back in 2017, leading to major criticism of United Airlines. It's something which they have not recovered from yet. Let's see. Among those passing on this date, architect Frank Lloyd Wright, singer Phil Oakes, singer Brooke Benton, that rainy night in Georgia, Sam and Dave's David Prater, and the man instrumental in the scandal over the game show 21, Charles Van Doren, all passing away on this date in history. This is the birth date of singer-activist Paul Robeson, actor Ward Bond, editor-publisher Hugh Hefner, musician Carl Perkins, and comedian Avery Schreiber. If you've ever heard the name Tom Lehrer, I don't have time to play it, but he does some tremendously amusing stuff. Tom Lehrer, 94 years of age today, also children's television producer Marty Krofft, Olivia from the Waltons, Michael Learned, actor is 83 today, actor Dennis Quaid, 68, actress supermodel Pauline Povorska is 57, from Sex and the City, Cynthia Nixon, 56, Rudy from The Cosby Show, Keisha Knight Pulliam, 43, the son of Albert Hammond Jr., from the rock group The Strokes, is 42. From Gossip Girl, Leighton Meester is 36. Jesse McCartney, the actor-singer, 35. From Twilight, Kristen Stewart, 32. Child actress Elle Fanning, 24. And from America's Got Talent, Jackie Evancho is 22. Those some of the people celebrating the 9th day of April is their birthday. If this is your birthday...
Hi, we're the Four Freshmen, and we just want to say... Happy birthday to you!
April 9th, 1938, Calling All Cars is up next on this Saturday. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox.
Hi, this is Kyle Horvath with the White Pine County Tourism and Recreation Board. If you want to get away from the big cities and get back to nature this summer, give us a call at 775-289-3720 or visit us online at elinevada.net. There's so much to do and see I can't mention it in 30 seconds, but check out our website and you'll see what Nevada is really all about. elinevada.net or follow us on Facebook or Instagram. Give us a call at 775-289-3720 or visit us online at elinevada.net.
The Overstock sale continues at MyPillow.com. Deep discounts on Giza Dream Sheets, MyPillow Original Pillows, the My Slippers, half price. I love mine. And with every order you make by going to MyPillow.com/radio specials, you'll get a free copy of Mike Lindell's book, What Are the Odds? From Crack Addict to CEO. MyPillow.com/radio specials, promo code USA. Now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox, April 9th, 1939, 83 years ago, Calling All Cars.
Calling All Cars, a copyrighted program created by Rio Grande.
San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office calling all cars. Attention all cars to broadcast 279 regarding a murder. Be on the lookout for a woman described as 5 feet, weight 102 pounds. Has black hair, brown eyes, may be armed. That's all. Rosenquist.
Yeah, I'll get it. Hello.
Hello, George?
Yeah, it's George. Who's calling?
Why, George, can't you guess?
I could, but I'm not in a guessing mood. That's the way thousands of motorists feel about gasoline. Why guess about a thing so important when you can know? Why experiment, trying to find out if the extravagant and prejudiced claims made for this or that motor fuel are on the up and up when the disinterested testimony of the men who drive the most and know the most about gasoline tells you that Rio Grande Cracked has all the qualities they demand for emergency driving under all conditions. Rely on the word of the men who drive your police cars, ambulances, fire engines, and other must-get their automobiles. They say that no gasoline equals Rio Grande Cracked when it comes to quick getaway, immediate acceleration, maximum power and speed and mileage. It's a fact, not guesswork, that more emergency cars are powered by this better gasoline wherever it is sold than any other brand. Quit guessing, friends. No. Get the most your automobile has to give you by tanking up with Rio Grande Cracked, the most highly recommended gasoline sold in the West. The facts around which tonight's Calling All Cars program has been built have been taken from the confidential files of the Sheriff of San Joaquin County. We have therefore asked Sheriff Martin Ansbro to prepare a foreword for our program.
Tonight's story is one that was enacted in the town of Stockton many years ago. It was a cleverly planned crime and one which took many hours and days of continuous work to break. Modern police methods have made the work of the law enforcement officer easier, but no improvement in method could ever make a peace officer more relentless in the pursuit of a criminal. It's the duty of a law enforcement officer to prove that crime is a losing game, and no matter how clever a criminal thinks he is, sooner or later he's going to learn, as did the woman whose story you're about to hear, that the law cannot lose and that crime never can pay.
On the early evening of Saturday, March 24, 1906, 2 baggage men employed by the Southern Pacific Railway at Stockton, California, were preparing to weigh the incoming mail.
Come on, Al. Let's weigh this mail and get it over with.
Just a minute, Fred, while I pull this trunk off the scales here.
What's the matter, Al? Getting soft?
No, I'm not getting soft. It's
bothered to look, you could have seen for yourself this blame thing weighs 225 pounds.
Yeah?
Sure. Whoever belongs to this trunk must have filled it with anvils.
Oh, well, people put funny things in trunks sometimes. Come on, let's get at this mail.
Hold on a second, Fred. There's something funny inside this thing. Listen while I rock it.
Sounds like something's loose in there. Something pretty big and heavy, too.
Yeah. You don't suppose somebody's shipping a trunk load of meat somewhere, do you?
I don't know. People do crazy things. Anyway, I guess the weather's cold enough to preserve meat for a few days if somebody wanted to ship it.
By golly, Fred, this thing's got my curiosity up. Uh-oh. There's something dead in that trunk, just as sure as you're born.
Do you suppose it could be a human body?
Oh, gosh, Fred, for the love of Mike, you give me the chills.
Just the same, I wouldn't be a bit surprised if that's what it is.
Well, what do you think we better do?
Call the cops, of course. Here, let me at that telephone. Say, operator, get me the police station, will you? Yeah. Hello? Listen, I'm calling from the baggage room down at the Southern Pacific Depot. Say, we got a trunk here that we think has a dead body in it. A few minutes later, Chief of Police E.J. Baker, accompanied by Captain of Police W.L. Walker and several other officers, arrived at the Southern Pacific baggage room and began questioning the two men on duty there.
This is the trunk you phoned us about, is it?
Yes, sir.
I see. Where's it supposed to be shipped?
Well, I'm not exactly sure. It was put on a baggage coach bound for Sacramento this afternoon, along with a suitcase. But they were taken off, and the boys on the train couldn't find any checks on them.
No checks, eh?
No, sir.
Say, there is a sort of funny odor in here, Chief.
Yes, I noticed it, Walker. Well, just standing here isn't going to tell us anything. A couple of you boys get the ropes off that trunk and see if you can't find something to break the lock with.
Yes, sir. There's a hammer and coal chisel laying around here somewhere. I think that... Yeah, here they are.
Now, that's fine, thanks.
Say, Chief, that's a brand new trunk. The rope looks new, too.
Yes, I know. That isn't a cheap trunk, either. It's a funny thing. There isn't some mark of identification on it.
Yeah, it is.
I shouldn't think a person would want to take a chance of losing a good trunk like that.
Well, there she is, Chief. Lock's broken.
All right, boys. Raise up the lid and let's have a look inside.
I knew it.
Well, looks like your suspicions are right, fellas.
Yeah.
Take a look at the body. Have either of you ever seen that man before?
No, not me.
Me neither. Say, this fella hasn't been dead very long, Chief.
How do you know, Walker?
I see here. The inside of the trunk's stained with fresh blood. It's still damp.
By George, that's right.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if he was still alive when he was shoved into it.
Well, there's a lot of things that'll have to be found out about this. But in the meantime, one thing is sure. This is a case of deliberate, cold-blooded murder.
The following day, Chief Baker and District Attorney Norton were discussing the case with Sheriff Walter F. Sibley in the latter's office while awaiting a report on the unidentified body from Coroner A.G. Southwick.
And you say this man was neatly dressed, Baker? Yes, his coat and shoes were missing, Sheriff, but there was nothing to indicate that he'd struggled with anyone. His clothes were in perfect order, even to the crease in his trousers.
I see. Tell me, just how was he lying in the trunk?
Well, he was on his back with his head down in one corner. The body was doubled up at the hips and the knees pressing downward on the chest and the legs and feet pushing up against the inside of the trunk top.
Was there anything besides the body in the trunk?
Yes, there was quite a bit of men's clothing, presumably his. We searched this stuff thoroughly, as well as the clothes he was wearing. There was no mark of identification on anything, or anything in the pockets to give us a clue as to who he might have been.
Was it the kind of a trunk that would ordinarily be fitted with trays?
Yes, that is, there was a place for a large tray at the top. Naturally, the tray had been removed to make room for the body, Mr. Norton.
Well, then it strikes me it'd be a good thing to locate that tray. Maybe we'd learn something.
I've assigned Officer Frank Briari to the case. I'm hoping he'll have something to report by this evening.
Yes, I hope so, too. This business has already gotten enough publicity for 4 murders.
Well, that's probably the coroner. He called to say he'd be right over. Come in.
Oh, hello, Southworth. Got anything for us?
Hello, Chief. Sheriff. How are you, Mr. Norton?
Oh, fine, thanks. Sit down, won't you?
Well, Southworth, what'd you find out?
Gentlemen, this case has got me stumped.
Why, what do you mean?
Well, in the first place, we couldn't find a sign of a wound except a few slight bruises near the top of the head. Later, when we examined the skull and brain, we found conclusively that these bruises held no significance whatsoever.
Well, that's odd. And how do you account for the blood we found in the trunk?
Evidently came from the man's nose. Probably as a result of being knocked around while he was in there.
What about poison?
I'm getting to that. Minute examination of the vital organs was made, and no stain or odor of any poison was found.
Did you test for potassium cyanide? That sometimes is rather hard to detect.
Yes, but the results were negative. As a matter of fact, every organ in the man's body was found to be in a normal, healthy condition. Frankly, we're completely mystified as to the cause of death.
It couldn't have been suffocation.
Oh, no. We'd have known that at once, Mr. Norton.
You're sure that your analysis is correct, Coroner?
Positive. However, to make doubly certain, I'm taking the vital organs to San Francisco for an expert chemical analysis. That's a good idea.
So now, gentlemen, all we have to do is find out not only who this man is and who killed him, but also how in the world a perfectly healthy, vigorous young man could come by his death without a mark on him.
Frank Briari, the officer whom Chief Baker had entrusted with the investigation, quickly learned the identity of the expressman who had driven the trunk to the depot in his wagon. Locating the man, Briari then found out that the trunk had been delivered from room 97 in the San Joaquin house. He immediately went there and carefully searched the designated room. Finding little of interest, he questioned the proprietor.
So, McVickers was the name of the people who occupied room 97, eh?
Yes, sir. Mr. and Mrs. Albert N. McVickers. They registered here on Friday evening.
That would be day before yesterday, wouldn't it? And you say they checked out yesterday afternoon?
Yes, that is, Mrs. McVickers checked out for the two of them. I didn't see anything of Mr. McVickers.
What did you say they registered from?
Jamestown, California.
Ah, Jamestown, eh? That's a little mining town east of here, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Well, did you see anything of a new trunk among the McVickers' belongings?
Why, yes. Mrs. McVickers had one sent up to the hotel yesterday morning and then had it checked out early in the afternoon.
I see.
April 9th, 1939, Calling All Cars on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Thank you so much for spending part of your Saturday with us. The news from 83 years ago today will be coming up following these words from your favorite station.
Let's see, if something costs less, but people are happier with it, that sounds like something to look into, and that's MediShare. Maybe you've heard switching to MediShare to pay for healthcare can save the typical family $500 a month, and that's huge, but it's also true that people are way more satisfied after making the switch, too. The customer satisfaction rate for MediShare is double that of the typical health insurance plan. Double. MediShare works. It's been around for more than a quarter century, and members have shared more than $3 billion of each other's bills. People love having telehealth and a huge nationwide PPO network. So, yeah, you can save a ton and like it better. Imagine being happy with how you're taking care of your health care. So if you're self-employed or part of the gig economy, or you just want a plan you're happy with, you can call right now and get a price within 2 minutes. A very, very smart use of 2 minutes. Here's the number you need. 833-34-BIBLE. That's 833-34-BIBLE. 833-34-BIBLE.
Are you suffering with arthritis or osteoporosis? Do you have diabetes? Did you know that these are just two of the hundreds of diseases that have seen improvement with Dr. Wallach's incredible longevity products? You can't get them at a health food store. The only way to get them is to call us at 800-214-0065. That's 800-214-0065. Do you have heart disease, fibromyalgia, or high blood pressure? Do you have a terrible time losing weight? Dr. Wallach can help. He was a veterinarian and cured diseases in animals. He felt that he could do the same for humans, so he became a physician. Over 50 years of research and helping people like you goes into every bottle of Dr. Wallach's amazing discoveries. Do you want to feel better? Learn how to treat the cause of your problem rather than covering up the symptoms with drugs. Call 800-214-0065. That's 800-214-0065.
Thanks for tuning into Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. You're listening to an episode on this Saturday of Calling All Cars, as it was originally broadcast Easter Sunday, April 9th, 1939. In the newspapers of that Sunday, 83 years ago, these were some of the headlines. Benito Mussolini's modern Roman Empire assumed domination over ancient Muslim Albania yesterday in a Holy Week conquest that set a fresh wave of war fright over the Western world. The unexpected fascist coup in the tiny kingdom, which only a week ago had seemed to be safe, picturesque ward of Il Duce, appeared to many a sign that the Roman Berlin Axis was on the march toward bigger things. Hosannas from countless choirs rang out through all Christendom today as the faithful gathered to commemorate the resurrection of Jesus Christ. In cities, towns, and hamlets, from the great reaches of St. Peter's in Rome to humble missions and far-flung outposts, Christians marked another Easter with the special services reserved for the festival nearly 2,000 years ago. Meanwhile, Moscow's few remaining churches were crowded with worshipers at the midnight Easter service. One neighborhood church built to accommodate about 400, surrounded by a throng of some 1,200, eager to get near enough to hear the Easter music and light the candles from other candles passed out from the altar to the crowd outdoors. Some financial leaders said they believe Wall Street jitters had brought about a market decline and business setback greater than known facts warranted. However, they made it plain they did not predict a turnabout. They pointed to continued widespread confusion over the world outlook. President William Allen White of Emporia, Kansas, announced last night that the forthcoming meeting in Washington of the American Society of Newspaper Editors would be devoted to an honest attempt to make some sense out of the public criticism of the press. In a statement released, the noted sage of Emporia said most editors and publishers are honestly trying to tell the truth accurately without bias and to print both sides of every controversy. Those some of the day's top news stories as reported in the newspapers of Sunday, April 9th, 1939 on your radio, Calling All Cars, which continues now on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox.
And did these people leave anything behind them? In their room, I mean?
The boy who cleaned up after they vacated found a box up there, but I believe that's all. That's the box over there in the corner.
Box. Looks more like a trunk tray to me.
Yes, I suppose that's what it is.
Well, I'm afraid I'll have to take it along with me.
Well, that's all right, officer. I don't imagine they'll come back for it anyway.
Well, it's a safe bet that Mr. McVickers won't be back after it.
Several hours after Officer Priori reported the results of his investigation to Chief Baker, there was a conference in the office of Sheriff Sibley, at which District Attorney Norton and Under Sheriff Carlton Case were present.
Have those baggage men located the suitcase that was taken off the Sacramento train along with the trunk, Baker?
Yes, they did, Mr. Norton. It was brought to my office this morning.
Yeah? What was in it?
I have a notation of its contents right here. Let's see. Oh, there was some woman's wearing apparel and several letters from a man in San Francisco addressed to Mrs. Emma Ledoux. Some photographs of both the dead man and Mrs. McVickers, shaving mug bearing the initials A.N. McV, and a bottle of beef iron and wine tonic.
You have the photographs with you?
Oh, yes. Here they are, Mr. Norton.
Mrs. McVicker's a pretty little thing, isn't she? Do you have the people at the hotel come down to the morgue to see if they could identify the body?
Oh, yes. They positively identified it as that of Mr. McVickers. They also identified Mrs. McVickers by these pictures.
But nobody seems to know where she is, huh?
No, we haven't been able to find a trace of her, Mr. Norton.
You know, something happened a little while ago that really has me puzzled.
Yeah? What's that?
Well, some fellow who comes from Amador County was in the police station and had a look at these photographs. He instantly identified Mrs. McVickers as a Mrs. Ledoux, the same name that's on these letters. He says she lives on a ranch up at Martell Station between Jackson and Sutter Creek.
Oh, he did, huh? Do you suppose that could mean that Mrs. McVickers and Mrs. Ledoux are one and the same person?
That's what I'd like very much to know.
Well, one thing is certain, gentlemen. We've got to find her, and just as quickly as we possibly can.
Well, any suggestions, Sheriff?
Yes. We know that trunk was originally put on the train to Sacramento, so I think we'd better send Captain Walker up there to see what he can find out. The letters we found in the suitcase came from San Francisco. I'd suggest Case go there and see if he can get a line on the woman.
Well, that's reasonable.
Chief Baker can concentrate on Stockton here, and I'll go on up to Amador County and see whether or not there's any connection between Mrs. McVickers and Mrs. Ledoux.
Fine. That's the plan that ought to get results.
Each of the officers left immediately for his destination as outlined by Sheriff Sibley. Under Sheriff Case, arriving in San Francisco late Sunday evening, had just returned to his hotel after several hours of unsuccessful search when the telephone in his room suddenly jangled.
Oh, now who in blazes can be calling me at 1 o'clock in the morning? Hello?
Hello, Case. This is Sibley.
Oh, yes, Sheriff.
I'm calling from up in Amador County. I want you to see if you can locate a fellow named Ben Hawley. He's a plumber there in San Francisco.
Ben Hawley?
Yes. He's a particular friend of Mrs. McVickers.
Well, how did you find out?
Oh, I found out a lot of things. I hired a horse and buggy up here, and I've been driving around the county all day asking questions of everybody I thought might know anything.
You haven't located Mrs. McVickers, have you?
No, that's why I'm calling you. But I found out that Mrs. McVickers and Mrs. Ledoux are the same woman.
Is that right?
Yes. Robert Ledoux is a teamster and rancher up here. He's only been married to her a few months. Apparently neither husband knew about the other.
Well, I'll be hanged.
I learned from Mrs. McVickers' mother that her daughter's been living there at the ranch lately. She told me that Mrs. McVickers had left for San Francisco last Friday, said she was going to meet this Ben Hawley. It seems that she's been going with this man, so she might be there now. Try and locate him as soon as you can, will you, Case?
Yeah, I'll get onto it right away, Sheriff.
Fine. Goodbye. And let me know the minute you find out.
All right, I'm coming. Oh, what's the idea of waking a man up at 3 o'clock in the morning?
Well, you'll know in a minute. I'm an officer.
Oh, I see. Well, come on in. What's trouble? Anything wrong?
Your name's Hawley, isn't it?
Yep.
Do you know a woman by the name of McVickers or Ledoux?
McVickers or Ledoux? No, I can't say I do.
Sure about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Take a look at these photographs. Ever see this woman before?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought you said you didn't know her.
Well, I wouldn't know her by the names you gave me. This woman is Mrs. Wilcox, Emma Wilcox.
Mrs. Wilcox? You must be mistaken.
No, that's Mrs. Wilcox, all right. I know her very well. She lives up in Amador County. See, I was engaged to marry her last year. Her husband had just died in Arizona a short time before.
Mr. Wilcox?
Yeah.
When did you last see Mrs. McVickers or Wilcox or whatever her name is?
Yesterday afternoon.
Yesterday afternoon?
Yeah, I got a telegram from her, from Stockton last Saturday morning. She said she wanted to meet me at the Regent Hotel, that she was leaving Stockton on the 2:55 train.
Did you meet her?
Yes, sir. I met her at the corner of 5th and Market Street, and we went to a restaurant and then danced for a while, and I met her again yesterday afternoon and took her across the bay to Point Richmond, where she caught a train for Stockton.
Oh, I see. Well, I won't keep you up any longer, Mr. Hawley. Well, thanks a lot for your information.
In the conclusion of Calling All Cars from 83 years ago, April 9th, 1939, comes up following these words on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox.
Are you in bad pain? You know what I mean. Your knees hurt. Your shoulder hurts. Your elbow and back are constantly killing you. And I'm sure you've tried every pain pill or cream available at the drugstore. Am I right? Well, here's something you haven't tried. Pain Magic. Pain Magic is not available at any drugstore. The only place you can get it is by calling the special toll-free number I'm about to give you. And to make things even better, call right now and find out about our buy one, get one free offer. We're so confident it'll work for you that we offer a free bottle with your purchase. No prescription required. Call now to learn how you can get Pain Magic and get rid of your pain. Remember, your results may vary. 800-492-8164. 800-492-8164. 800-492-8164. That's 800-492-8164.
On Sunday's Classic Radio Theater, an episode of Mutual's Crime Club. This episode from 75 years ago, April 10th, 1947, the Gray Mist Murders. A pleasure cruise to Hawaii on a private yacht becomes the scene of many murders. That's coming up on Sunday's Classic Radio Theater, but now the conclusion of Calling All Cars, 83 years ago, April 9th, 1939.
Within an hour, Under Sheriff Case managed to locate the conductor of the train Mrs. McVickers had boarded and learned that she had gotten off at Antioch. Then he immediately put in a long-distance call to Sheriff Veal of Contra Costa County, in which Antioch is located, describing the woman and suggesting that a check of the hotels be made. A short time later, Sheriff Veal called back and informed Case that a woman answering his description had been located and was being held until his arrival. Case then telephoned District Attorney Norton in Stockton, telling him that Mrs. McVickers was in the custody of Antioch officers and arranging to meet him there. Shortly after noon of that same Monday, Case and Norton met Sheriff Veal in the lobby of a small Antioch hotel, and together they confronted a tiny and very attractive brunette.
You're Mrs. Albert McVickers, aren't you?
Yeah, that's my name.
I'd like to ask you some questions, Mrs. McVickers.
Sure, why not?
You know these men are police officers, don't you?
Certainly. Do I look that stupid?
Sheriff Veal tells me you signed the register here as Mrs. Jones from San Francisco. Why did you do that?
Well, I had my reasons, but they aren't what you think. I know what the trouble is and why you're here, but I have nothing to be afraid about.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, Mrs. McVickers. Now, suppose you tell us everything you've been doing since you and your husband registered at the San Joaquin House in Stockton last Friday.
Of course, that's easy enough. Mr. McVickers and I registered at the San Joaquin House last Friday, like you said, and then we went out for dinner. After that, we went over to Allison's furniture store to exchange some furniture.
Exchange some furniture?
Well, yes, you see, we bought some furniture at Allison's when we were last in Stockton several weeks ago. Mr. McVickers had intended to send it up to Jamestown, where he worked as a timberman in the Wellman gold mine.
You mean you were going to start housekeeping up there?
No, sir, not me. He was going to batch it with some of the boys, but, well, he took sick and quit his job, figuring on going to Arizona the first of next week on account of his health. He'd drawn all his pay and was settling up his accounts before he went. He wouldn't need the furniture in Arizona, so he told me I could have it.
I see. You weren't intending to go with him.
I was going to take the furniture and go back to the ranch and live with my mother.
What happened after you left the furniture store?
Well, we ran into a friend of Mr. McVickers, a man by the name of Joe Miller. He came up to our hotel room, and we sat around for a while, and then he and Mr. McVickers went out somewhere together. They didn't get in until, I'd say about 4 o'clock Saturday morning.
What happened then?
Well, they woke me up when they came in, making an awful lot of noise. Both Miller and McVickers had been drinking.
Wake up, honey, wake up. We got company.
Don't bother. Now let her sleep.
Huh?
Here, have a drink.
Okay,
Come on.
Hey, what's the meaning of this, Al McVickers? You want to disgrace us both?
Think nothing of it, honey. Think nothing of it.
Sure, we just been having fun. That is, Al's been having fun.
Sure.
He just won every cent I had in the world.
That's true, Al. You give the man his money and come on to bed.
Oh, give him back his money. You think I'm crazy? I won it, didn't I?
No, you didn't win it.
I
You
did.
stole it, you cheat.
Well, who's the cheat?
You are.
Now,
You know
look
it.
at
Please, stop this argument. You'll wake up the hotel.
All right, we'll wake up the hotel. Who cares? I'm going to get my money back.
I'll see that Al gives you back your money in the morning, Mr. Miller. Now listen, I want you to get out of this room before I get somebody to put you out.
Go ahead, see if I can. Go on, I'm going to get my money right now.
All right, I warned you, Mr. Miller. I'm going to get the manager.
And you did call the manager, Mrs. McVickers?
No, I started to, but thought better of it. After a few minutes, I came back to the room. It was all upset, as if there had been quite a tussle. Mr. Miller had gone, but Mr. McVickers was on his knees on the floor, awfully sick.
What did you do then?
Well, I helped him up from the floor, and he sat down on the edge of the bed. He kept saying, "I can't get my breath." Then I started to get a paper to fan him with, but before I could do anything, he fell over sideways on the bed, like this.
I see. Go on.
Well, I got a glass of water and tried to give it to him, but he couldn't drink it. It all ran down his face. Then I went out into the hall to try and get help and met Mr. Miller coming out of the room.
Hey, where do you think you're going?
Albert's fainted. I'm going to get help.
No, you're not. Come on back in your room with me.
But I got to get help for my...
No, you don't have to do anything but keep your mouth shut. Now, come on in here. Yeah, all right. Now, wait a minute while I have a look at him.
I'm afraid, Mr. Miller. He's lying awful still.
Now, shut up and let me handle this. Well, look here, Mrs. McVickers. We got to use our heads. Your husband's dead.
Dead?
Yeah.
Let me out of here. Let me out. I got to tell the manager.
Back in here, you fool. Now, I'll just keep that key in my pocket until I'm ready to open the door. And if you know what's good for you, you listen to what I have to say.
All right. What else can I do?
If you ever mention my name in this business, it'll be the last thing you ever do, understand?
Yes.
Now, then, listen. As soon as the stores are open, I want you to go out and buy a good, strong trunk. We'll ship Al's body to San Francisco and keep it in storage for a year or so.
Oh, this is a terrible mess you gotten us into.
Stop worrying. If you do as I say, everything will be all right. Here's some money to get the trunk with. And be sure it's a deep one. You might as well get some rope to tie it with, too.
All right.
And tell the expressman who sends the trunk over to call for it again about noon. Then all you have to do is check out of the hotel and leave the rest to me. Have you got everything straight?
And so you went out and bought the trunk and the rope, huh?
Yeah. Then after I checked out of the San Joaquin house, I took the train for San Francisco, where I was to meet Mr. Miller the next day.
Did you meet anyone in San Francisco you knew?
Yes. While I was eating in a restaurant Saturday evening, Mr. Hawley came in. He's a man who did some work for my mother once. After dinner, he took me to my hotel, where Miller had told me to register as Mrs. Wilcox.
I see. Did you meet this Miller on Sunday, as you'd arranged?
Yes. I wanted to get home to Mother's ranch, but Miller was watching me. In the afternoon, he took me across to Point Richmond on the ferry and told me to go to Antioch and register at this hotel as Mrs. Jones. He was to have met me here this morning.
Did you telephone or telegraph from Stockton to anyone in San Francisco, telling them that you were coming there?
No, I'm quite sure I didn't.
Then you don't recognize this message I have in my hand, a telegram sent to Ben Hawley.
No, I don't.
One more question. Did the bottle of beef iron and wine found in Mr. McVicker's suitcase belong to you?
Why, yes, it did. I bought it at the drugstore under the San Joaquin house in Stockton.
About how many doses were taken out of the bottle?
2.
And did you take them both?
Yeah, I did.
I'd like to ask a question, Mrs. McVickers. Just when and where were you and Albert McVickers married?
4 years ago at Bisbee, Arizona.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
And now, Mrs. McVickers, I'm afraid we'll have to take you into custody and return you to Stockton. Murder is a mighty serious business, you know. Mrs.
McVickers Ledoux was returned to Stockton by the officers on the same day of her questioning and lodged in jail. At the same time, an intensive search was launched in an effort to apprehend the mysterious Joe Miller. Then began a systematic checking of the statements made to the officers in Antioch for the prisoner. For several days, an almost constant stream of prospective witnesses filed through the office of District Attorney Norton, telling what they knew about the case.
When I delivered the trunk, she told me it was going out on the 1 o'clock train, that it would be heavy because she was going to pack it full of dishes. So I came right back at noon.
As I say, my wife and I have the room adjoining 97 at the San Joaquin house. We didn't go to bed that night until very late. but we heard no unusual noises or any disturbance of any kind.
And McVickers never said anything to me about quitting at the mine because he was sick. When McVickers asked for his pay, he said he was going to take over the management of the ranch where his wife's mother lives. Said he'd make $4 a day at the ranch, where he only made $3 at the Wellman mine.
Even as Mrs. McVickers Ledoux's statements had conflicted with those of Ben Hawley, so it was the case in many other instances. Then, several days after her return to Stockton, Dr. Samuelson called at the office of District Attorney Norton.
You wish to see me, Dr. Samuelson?
Yes, I'm a physician and surgeon practicing in San Francisco. I read about this case in the papers and thought I'd better come and have a talk with you.
I see. Well, go on, Doctor.
On the evening of March 12th, I had a call from her requesting me to come at once to the Concord Hotel, where she and her husband were stopping. When I arrived, she told me that her husband was very ill and asked me to do something for him. She expressed the opinion that he might have been poisoned.
And had he been?
No, I think not. I treated him at the time and asked him if he knew what was the matter. He said that he didn't know, but that his wife had told him it was probably the clams and beer they'd had for supper.
Mm-hmm. Well, what then?
He seemed to be getting better, so I got ready to leave. But before I went, Mrs. McVickers requested that I give her an order for cyanide of potassium.
And did you?
Yes. I forget the excuse she gave me for wanting it, but I remember that I filled out the order.
Well, this may turn out to be a very valuable bit of information.
Possibly, but I haven't finished yet, Mr. Norton. The following morning, Mrs. McVickers came to my office and asked for some morphine. She stated that she was addicted to the use of it and had been for years.
She doesn't look like a narcotic addict to me, Doctor.
Perhaps not. At all events, I gave her 1 gram, or 60 grains of morphine and half-grain tablets.
Didn't you consider that rather dangerous?
Well, as I say, I'm known Mrs. McVickers for a...
Oh, come in.
Oh, I didn't know you were busy, Mr. Norton.
Oh, that's all right, Baker.
I wanted to talk to you about the McVickers case. Incidentally, there was a telegram came for me a few minutes ago that I thought you might want to see.
Oh, pardon me a moment, Doctor.
Sure.
A copy of the one received by Coroner Southworth.
Examination submitted to me on March 26th of the stomach, pancreas, and liver of the dead man found in Stockton March 24th discloses small quantity chloral and large quantity morphine. Persistent efforts to find cyanide of potassium result in positive proof of its absence.
What do you think of that?
Well, in view of what I've just learned from Dr. Samuelson here, combined with the findings of Dr. Rogers, I think we can get an immediate indictment against Mrs. McVickers.
A few moments later, District Attorney Norton and Chief Baker were confronting Mrs. McVickers Ledoux with this new evidence in her cell at the Stockton jail.
Now, you might as well tell us about it, Mrs. McVickers. We know you did it, and we know why.
I didn't, I tell you. I didn't. It was Miller.
Oh, come now. We don't think there is any such person as Miller. You just made him up.
Oh, that's not true. Miller killed my husband.
No, Miller didn't, and nobody else except you. You were afraid that your secret of having 2 husbands would be discovered. Besides that, you wanted McVickers' money. What little he had.
No.
And so you went to Jamestown and got McVickers to quit his job at the Wellman mine. You told him that your mother would pay him a higher salary on her ranch, and you tricked him into believing you'd keep house for him there.
Lies. They're all lies.
Then you made him collect all the money that was due him and brought him here to Stockton. And then you put some of the morphine you'd gotten from Dr. Samuelson into a glass of tonic, a deliberate overdose. You meant to ship his body off in a trunk on the 1 o'clock train, but you couldn't do that because there wasn't near enough death at that time. That's true now, isn't it? Confess it. It's true.
I didn't kill him. Really, I didn't. It wasn't me. I admit I put Al's body in the trunk, but I didn't kill him. I had a hard time doing it because he was heavy. Terrible heavy. But I didn't kill him.
All right, Mrs. McVickers. That's all we wanted to know.
What about this fella, Joe Miller?
He's a guy that wrote a joke book. But this joke is on Emma, and she's going to have a long time to laugh at it.
Emma McVickers was indicted and tried for murder and sentenced to be hanged. But her sentence was commuted to life imprisonment. Through the bitter years of a long life, she is learning that crime does not pay.
San Joaquin County Sheriff's Office calling all cars, attention all cars, to cancellation broadcast 279 regarding a murder. Suspect in this case is now in custody. That's all. Rosenquist.
April 9th, 1939, calling all cars on Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. Hope you'll do me a favor and thank this radio station and support their advertisers. It is their kindness and courtesy that allows us to be with you each and every Saturday at this time. And if you would please, if you miss a day on this station, you do not have to miss a single show. We produce 21 hours of the greatest radio shows of all time each and every week. You can find them at iHeartRadio, Spotify, by Spreaker, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, or Amazon, or even at Facebook, believe it or not. Facebook's good for something. Just search for Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. That's Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox. You can also get all our social media links. You can also get our shows on demand, and you can contact me directly at our webpage, which is classicradio.stream, classicradio.stream. Thanks so much for tuning in. Tell all your friends the great radio shows are right here at this spot on the dial. Classic Radio Theater with Wyatt Cox on your favorite radio station.